There's a live stream on the dark web that claims to have been running continuously since 1996. No one knows who put it online, and once you watch it, you can never forget it. This is what happened when someone finally found it. I discovered the stream by accident, on a night where the silence in my apartment felt heavier than usual. The kind of silence that makes the refrigerator hum sound like a growl and every distant car like a warning. The browser tab should have been harmless. It started as a simple search for old forgotten corners of the internet, the sort of online urban archaeology people joke about, but never really do. I was exhausted, half bored, half anxious, scrolling through dead forums and archived pages that no one had touched in years. That was when I saw a post with no title, just a string of meaningless characters, a date, and a link. The date was the only thing that stood out. The post itself had no replies, no upvotes, nothing. Yet it sat there, untouched but never removed, like whoever moderated that place had decided not to see it. The link pointed to a W address, a door to somewhere I knew I shouldn't open. I hesitated for a long time. There was a strange discomfort, the feeling that this wasn't just another shady site with stolen data or contraband. This felt older, in the way that abandoned buildings feel older than their actual age. Curiosity wins against caution most nights. That night, it completely devoured it. I launched the special browser, entered the address, and waited. The loading icon spun for longer than usual, like it was pulling the connection from somewhere far beneath the surface of the normal web, from a level of depth that wasn't meant for ordinary people. Then the page appeared. It was stark, minimal, almost offensively simple. A black background, a centered video player, and a line of text above it. The End of the World. Lived since 1996. The title was written in plain white letters. No logo, no design, no suggestions on what it was supposed to be. Beneath the player, there was a thin status bar. Live, 29 years, 4 months, 12 days, 6 hours, 41 minutes, 9 seconds. The counter moved with mechanical precision. It was still counting. I stared at the word live. The rational part of me immediately assumed it was a loop, a prank, some bizarre art project designed to unsettle anyone who happened to stumble upon it. Yet there was something oppressive about how long that timer claimed to be running. I clicked play. The stream did not start with sound. For several seconds, all I saw was darkness, filtered through the digital grain of low-quality video. The timestamp in the corner of the feed flickered faintly in red digits, but the numbers did not show the current date or time. They were frozen, as if the camera was trying to remember when it had first opened its eye. Then the image slowly brightened. The camera seemed to be placed in a high corner of a room, angled down, like a security camera fixed to a ceiling. The resolution was bad, but not in the way of compressed modern footage. This was the particular roughness of obsolete technology. The colors were washed out, the contrast uneven, and the shadows too thick. The room itself was disturbingly plain. 4 walls, pale and empty, with a cracked line of paint stretching from the top corner all the way down to the floor on the left side. There was a single metal bed frame in the center of the room, without sheets, without a mattress. Just the naked frame, a skeleton of a bed. In the far right corner, an old television sat on a small table. Not a flat screen, a bulky box with a curved glass front, silent and off, reflecting just a faint suggestion of the room back at the camera. The floor was concrete, bare, dirty, with darker stains that the video noise made impossible to identify. No windows were visible from that angle, no door either, just that suffocating rectangular space, as if the room had been carved out of some larger darkness and was floating alone. No chat, no viewer count, no interface to interact with, just the stream. I watched for several minutes, waiting for something to move, for someone to enter, for any sign that this wasn't just a still image. But it wasn't a still image. The grain kept shifting. The timer in the corner showed milliseconds trembling. This was undeniably live, yet nothing in the room moved. After about 10 minutes, I tried to close the tab. My cursor moved up, but the browser froze. Not completely, only that particular tab. Every other open page reacted fine, but the dark web tab refused to acknowledge my command. I tried the keyboard shortcut to close it. Nothing. The video stuttered once, just a slight interruption in the feed, like static. Then, for the very first time, something changed. In the center of the empty bed frame, a single dot appeared. a pixel, almost invisible. I leaned closer to the screen, thinking it was a glitch. The dot expanded. It wasn't an animation or a digital effect. It was as if the camera was slowly adjusting its exposure to reveal something small and dark resting in the middle of the bed frame. A shape. It looked like a stone. A perfectly smooth, oval stone, darker than the surrounding metal. I blinked, feeling the beginning of a headache at the back of my skull. The stone hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. I had stared at that empty bed frame for minutes. Now the stone was simply there. As I watched, the timestamp in the corner finally shifted. Not the minutes, not the seconds, the year. The frozen, wrong date blinked and changed into the current year. The clock caught up in a single blink, as if the stream had just now acknowledged my presence. My speakers crackled once, but until that moment, the stream had been dead silent, apart from the faint hum of my own equipment. Now, with a low hiss, sound crept in. Not voices, not music, something else. It was distant, like the noise of wind passing through a narrow tunnel far from the microphone. A kind of pressure hiss, almost inaudible, but it made my teeth feel strange. There was a sensation of static at the back of my tongue, like I had licked a battery. I tried one more time to close the page. Still nothing. For a few seconds, I considered cutting the connection completely, shutting down the router, pulling the cable from the wall. But another thought, darker and more shameful, held me there. If this is really live, if it's been on since 1996, what if I'm the first one who's actually watching it now? The thought felt absurd, yet disturbingly plausible. The page had been hidden behind an unmarked post on an archive of an old forum. There was no index, no search visibility, nothing that linked back to it. The camera did not move. The room remained still. The stone on the bed frame did not roll, did not shift, did not glow or pulse. It simply existed, dense and utterly wrong in that sterile emptiness. I don't know how long I watched. Time felt distorted. The digits on my own clock jumped in ways that didn't make sense. I remember the clock on my desk showing 1:21. Then, 5 heartbeats later, it was 1:49. On the stream, the timer beneath the title continued to advance steadily, second by second. 29 years, 4 months, 12 days, 6 hours, 43 minutes, 21 seconds. It was like staring at a wound in the concept of time itself. A sudden change on the screen made me flinch. The old television in the corner of the room turned on by itself. There was no remote insight, no visible cable, no hand reaching in from outside the frame. It simply clicked into life, its glass surface filling with white static. The static was thick, almost textured, as if the screen was not showing noise but something extremely far away that the camera couldn't focus on. The hiss in my speakers grew louder. The microphone in that room, wherever it was, picked up the sound of the static with dreadful clarity. It was not the soft, snow-like hiss I remembered from old televisions. It was harsher, jagged, full of tiny cuts of silence that made it feel intentional. In the center of that static, a darker patch began to emerge. Just like the stone on the bed, a shape slowly resolved inside the chaos. It took a long time before my brain found patterns in it. It was a face, not a human face. Not fully. It was more like a suggestion of a face, like someone had taken the idea of facial features and smeared them across the screen with fingers dipped in shadow. 2 darker ovals where eyes might be, a horizontal absence where a mouth could be. I realized I was holding my breath. The stone on the bed frame, the one that had appeared out of nowhere, now seemed slightly different. The video quality made it hard to be sure, but there was a suggestion of faint lines across its surface. Lines that mirrored the vague shapes on the television. The timestamp in the corner flickered again. For a single frame, it displayed a date that hadn't happened yet. Next month. A specific day. A specific time. Then it snapped back to the current time. My heart hammered against my ribs. I rewound the feed, but the stream refused. There was no slider, no button for replay. The interface was brutally simple. You watch or you don't. Behind the static, the not face seemed to lean closer. The darker ovals of its non-eyes deepened, like the screen was becoming a tunnel instead of a surface. Then the sound changed. Among the noise, I began to hear something that wasn't random at all. There was a patter, a rhythmic rise and fall, like breathing that had been stretched and distorted. The hiss became wet, There was no way to explain it logically, but my brain associated that sound with something organic, something too close to a microphone. It felt like the stream was no longer just broadcasting from that empty room. It felt like it was listening back. The realization came with an almost physical chill. If this has really been live since 1996, how many people has it listened to? The stone on the bed frame pulsed, ever so slightly, not with light, but as if its outline expanded for a fraction of a second, then shrank back. It might have been a compression artifact. A glitch, that's what I told myself. And yet, every instinct screamed that it was something else. The sound from the television shifted again. The white noise thinged, opening micro gaps of silence, where, if I strained myself, I could almost imagine words trying to form, like syllables washing against the shore of my comprehension, but never quite landing. I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes burning from not blinking enough. That was when the stream spoke. It did not use a language I recognized. It didn't string together vowels and consonants. It spoke in timing. The static cut out for exactly 1 second, then returned, then cut out again for half a second, then 3 seconds, then 1, then 2. The pattern repeated. 1, half, 3, 1, 2. I grabbed a pen and scribbled the sequence down on the notepad. I kept near my keyboard, the ink shaking from my hand. 1.5, 3, 1, 2. I counted them again, matching the silences as they appeared in the audio. The pattern did not break. It was intentional. My mind instantly tried to map it to something. Code, numbers, coordinates, anything that could make it less alien. Perhaps it was meaningless, just my brain forcing structure where there was none. Yet the more I listened, the more it felt targeted. Not random, not general, directed at me. I muted the speakers and leaned back, exhaling. My shoulders ached, and a cold sweat had formed along my spine. I reminded myself that it was just a stream. Old tech, weird art. Some obsessive person somewhere had left this thing running. I moved the mouse to close the window again. This time, the browser responded. The tab's close icon lit up as I hovered over it. Relief washed through me. Then the stream's image changed for the first time in a way that could not be explained as anything but deliberate. On the concrete floor of the room, directly beneath the camera's point of view, something new appeared. A rectangle of darker gray, thin but unmistakable. It was a shadow, a human silhouette standing directly under where the camera should be, but there was no body casting it. The room, as far as the lens showed, was still empty. Bed frame, old television, cracked wall. No person, no figure, no movement. And yet the floor now displayed the clear shape of someone standing there, as if the invisible was being revealed only by its absence of light. My hand froze over the close button. The shadow shifted. Not a lot, not like someone walking. It swayed, a tiny movement, unnatural and slow, like it was stretching. The shape's head turned, the outline of a chin angle. From somewhere behind my wall, a low thud resonated. It was not the neighbor's usual sounds, not the pipes, not the elevator. It was too deliberate, too perfectly timed with the surge of sound from the stream. It came again, a slow, heavy impact, like something large shifting its weight against the other side of the wall. I turned my head, staring at the blank paint of my own apartment, my heart pounding. The stream's audio continued, unbroken, but now its hiss carried an echo that didn't belong to the room it was showing. It belonged to mine. I stood up from my chair slowly, the way you move when you're not sure if the floor beneath you is still solid. The thud came again. This time it was louder, more deliberate, like something testing the surface from the other side. My wall, the one that separated my apartment from the next unit, had always been thin. I could hear conversations sometimes, muffled music, the occasional argument. But this was different. This wasn't sound bleeding through plaster and drywall. This was contact. I moved closer to the wall, my breathing shallow. The stream's audio filled the silence behind me, that wet hiss wrapping around the room like fog. I glanced back at the screen. The shadow on the concrete floor was still there, motionless now, but its presence felt heavier, more aware. The television in the streamed room continued to show static, but the face inside it had shifted. The darker ovals were no longer centered. They had moved to the left side of the screen, as if the thing behind the noise was watching something off camera. Watching the door, maybe, or watching me. I reached out and pressed my palm flat against the wall. It was cold, colder than it should have been. The apartment wasn't well insulated, but this was a different kind of cold, the kind that sinks through skin and settles in bone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I felt it. A vibration, faint at first, almost imperceptible, like the distant rumble of the subway train passing underground. But there was no subway near my building. No trains, no construction at this hour. The vibration grew stronger. It pulsed in rhythm with the hiss from the stream, as if the two were synchronized, feeding off each other. I pulled my hand back and stepped away from the wall. On the screen, the shadow moved again. This time, it didn't sway. It walked. The silhouette slid across the concrete floor of the streamed room, slow and smooth, like it was being dragged by invisible strings. It moved toward the left wall, the same wall I had just touched in my own apartment. My heart slammed against my ribs. The shadow stopped at the wall in the stream. Then, impossibly, it raised one arm. The motion was jerky, wrong, like stop-motion animation, played too slowly. The shadow's hand pressed flat against the pale surface of the streamed room's wall, and in my apartment, the wall thumped again. Not from the neighbor's side, from directly where I had touched it. The sound was so precise, so perfectly aligned with the movement on the screen, that my knees almost buckled. I staggered backward until my shoulders hit the opposite wall, my eyes locked on the monitor. The shadow held its position, hand pressed against the wall, as if it was waiting for me to respond. I didn't move. The stream's timer continued its relentless count. 29 years, 4 months, 12 days, 6 hours, 51 minutes, 14 seconds. The hiss in my speakers shifted again. The wet texture deepened, and beneath it, I began to hear something new. Breathing, not mine, not from outside my apartment. From the stream, it was slow, labored, the sound of lungs that hadn't moved air in a very long time. Suddenly remembering how each inhale was a ragged scrape, each exhale a low moan that barely qualified as human. I wanted to close the browser. I wanted to shut down the computer, rip the power cable from the wall, throw the whole machine out the window. But I couldn't. Shadow on the screen began to change shape. Its outline blurred, the edges softening and spreading like ink in water. The silhouette grew taller, thinner, stretching upward until its head nearly touched the top of the camera's frame. Then it started to peel away from the floor. Not standing, not lifting, peeling like a sticker being pulled off glass, slow and deliberate, the darkness coming unstuck from the concrete and rising into three-dimensional space. For the first time since I had started watching, I saw depth in that room. The thing that had been a shadow was becoming solid. It still had no color, no features beyond the vague suggestion of a human form, but it was no longer flat. It had volume now, presence, and it was facing the camera. The breathing from the speakers grew louder. I realized with a sickening lurch in my stomach that the rhythm matched the rise and fall of the shape's torso. It was breathing. On my wall, the thumping started again, but this time it didn't stop. Thud, thud, thud. Slow, steady, like a heartbeat. Each impact sent a faint tremor through the floor beneath my feet. I forced myself to look away from the screen and stared at the wall. There was nothing visible, no cracks, no movement, just blank, off-white paint. But the thumping continued, and then I saw it. A small spot on the wall, directly in line with where I had touched it, began to darken. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the lamp on my desk. But the spot grew. It spread outward in a slow, circular stain, like water seeping through from the other side. Except it wasn't water. The color was wrong, too dark, too thick, almost black in the center, and fading to a deep rust at the edges. I took a step closer, despite every instinct screaming at me to run. The stain pulsed. It expanded with each thud from behind the wall, breathing in sync with the shape on the screen. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely feel my fingers. I glanced back at the monitor. The thing in the streamed room had moved closer to the camera. Its face, if it could be called that, was now visible in more detail. The features were still wrong, still blurred and incomplete, but I could make out the hollow suggestion of eyes, deep and empty, and a mouth that hung open in a way that didn't belong to any living thing. The static on the television in the corner of the room had changed too. The not face inside the screen was gone. Instead, the static now showed something else. My apartment. The angle was wrong, distorted, like the image had been stretched and warped through a funhouse mirror. But it was unmistakably my space. I could see my desk, my chair, the bookshelf against the far wall, and in the center of the static-filled image, standing with his back to the camera, was me. I was watching myself. The version of me on the television didn't move, didn't turn around, just stood there, frozen, staring at something off screen. My throat closed. I looked down at my own body, at my hands, at the floor beneath my feet. I was still here, still real. But the image on the stream's television said otherwise. The breathing from the speakers became a growl. The shape in the room stepped forward, moving out of the camera's frame. For 3 agonizing seconds, the stream showed nothing but the empty bed frame, the dark stain on the wall, and the television, with its distorted view of my apartment. Then the camera shook. Not a glitch, not interference. The entire feed jolted, as if someone had grabbed the camera and wrenched it to the side. The angle shifted. Now the camera was pointing at the door I had never seen before. It was metal, rusted at the edges, with a small window near the top covered by a grate. The door was open. Beyond it there was only darkness. But something was moving in that darkness. I heard it before I saw it. A wet, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across wet concrete. The shape emerged into the edge of the frame. It wasn't human anymore. It had too many limbs, too many joints bending in directions that defied anatomy. Its head, if it had ever had one, was now a smooth, featureless dome that reflected the dim light of the room like polished bone. It crawled toward the camera, slow and deliberate, each movement accompanied by a sound like cracking wood. My wall exploded with noise. The thumping became frantic, violent, as if something on the other side was throwing itself against the surface with everything it had. The stain spread faster now, blooming across the paint like a grotesque flower. I stumbled backward, my legs hitting the edge of my bed. The thing on the screen filled the entire frame now, its eyeless face pressed so close to the camera that I could see the texture of its surface, rough, porous, wet. Then it spoke, not through the speakers, through my wall. The voice came from inside, the plaster, muffled and distorted, but unmistakably present. It said one word, my name. Not the name I used online. Name, my real name. The one on my birth certificate. The one only a handful of people in the world knew. The stream's timer flickered. The numbers scrambled, rearranging themselves into a new sequence. Not a time, coordinates, latitude and longitude. Precise down to the 6th decimal. I didn't need to look them up. I knew exactly where they pointed. They were the coordinates of my building, of my apartment, of the exact spot where I was standing. The thing on the screen pulled back slightly, and for the first time I saw its mouth. It opened vertically, splitting its face from top to bottom, revealing rows of something that might have been teeth, or splinters, or broken glass. The breathing stopped. The thumping stopped. The stain on my wall stopped spreading. Everything went silent. And then, from somewhere inside my apartment, not from the computer, not from the wall, but from the air itself, I heard it. A whisper, soft close, right behind me. Turn around. I didn't turn around. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to look, to confirm that I was still alone, that the whisper had been my imagination, a trick of exhaustion and fear. But I didn't turn around, because I knew with a certainty that bypassed logic and settled deep in my gut, that if I did, I would see something I could never unsee. Instead, I kept my eyes locked on the monitor. The thing on the screen had pulled back further now, retreating into the shadows at the edge of the frame. Its mouth remained open, that vertical split in its face gaping like a wound. But it wasn't moving anymore. It was waiting. The whisper came again, closer this time. So close I felt the faint brush of air against the back of my neck. Turn around, my hands clenched into fists. My fingernails dug into my palms hard enough to hurt. The pain helped. It reminded me that I was still here, still solid, still real. I forced myself to take a breath. Then, slowly, I turned my head, not my body, just my head, and looked over my shoulder. The room was empty. No figure, no shadow, no presence lurking behind me. Just my bed, the nightstand, the lamp casting its weak yellow light across the walls. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. Because when I turned back to the monitor, the stream had changed again. The camera was no longer pointing at the thing in the doorway. It had shifted to show a different angle of the room, one I hadn't seen before. This view showed the wall opposite the bed frame, and on that wall there was something new. A mirror. It was large, rectangular, framed in dark wood that looked old and warped. The glass was dirty, streaked with grime, and something darker that had dried in uneven lines. And in the reflection, I saw the room, not the room from the stream, my room. The mirror in the streamed feed was showing my apartment in real time from an angle that shouldn't exist. I could see my desk, the chair I had been sitting in, the glow of the monitor, and I could see myself standing exactly where I was now, staring at the screen. My reflection in the impossible mirror moved when I moved. I raised my hand, slowly, and watched as my reflection did the same. But there was a delay, a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but it was there. My reflection was just slightly behind me. I lowered my hand and stepped to the left. My reflection followed, lagging by that same tiny margin. The thing in the doorway of the streamed room had disappeared entirely now, but I could still hear it, that wet, dragging sound, echoing faintly through the speakers. It was moving somewhere off camera. The timer beneath the stream's title flickered again, and a new line of text appeared below it. Viewers, 1. I stared at the number, 1 viewer. But as I watched, the number changed. Viewers, 2. My blood went cold. Someone else was watching, or something else. I scanned the interface, looking for any indication of who the other viewer might be. But there was nothing. No chat, no usernames. Just that single terrible number. I grabbed my phone from the desk and opened the browser, typing in the onion address from memory. The page loaded slow and stuttering, and the stream appeared. I was watching it on 2 devices now, my computer and my phone. The viewer count should have gone up to 3, but it stayed at 2. I set the phone down, my hands trembling. If I wasn't the second viewer, then who was? The answer came faster than I wanted. On the stream, the mirror's reflection changed. My apartment was still visible, but now there was something else in the frame. A figure. It stood in the corner of my room, just outside the reach of the lamplight, barely visible in the reflection. Tall, thin, motionless. I spun around. The corner was empty. I looked back at the screen. The figure in the mirror was still there, and now it was moving. It stepped forward into the light, and I saw it clearly for the first time. It was me, not a distorted version, not a shadow or a silhouette. It was an exact copy, dressed in the same clothes, standing in the same posture, even breathing at the same rhythm. But its eyes were wrong. They were too dark, too deep, like holes punched through the surface of a mask. The copy raised its hand and pointed at the screen, at me, then it smiled. The expression didn't belong on my face. It was too wide, too sharp, pulling at the corners of the mouth in a way that made the skin look stretched and thin. I backed away from the monitor, my legs hitting the bed again. The copy in the mirror stepped closer to the reflection of the screen, leaning in as if it was trying to see through the glass. And then, impossibly, it spoke. Its lips moved and sound came through my speakers. Not the wet hiss, not the breathing, my voice. You shouldn't have watched. The words were flat, emotionless, like they were being read from a script. You shouldn't have watched, it repeated, and this time there was something underneath the words, a crackling, staticky undertone that made my teeth ache. The stream's camera shifted again, this time pulling back to show the entire room. The mirror was still there, still reflecting my apartment, but now the bed frame in the center of the room wasn't empty anymore. Someone was lying on it. The figure was curled into a fetal position, facing away from the camera. I couldn't see their face, but I could see their clothes. The same clothes I was wearing. My vision blurred. The room around me felt unstable, like the walls were tilting inward. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. On the screen, the figure on the bed frame began to move. Slowly, stiffly, it uncurled and sat up. Its back was still to the camera, but I could see its shoulders rising and falling with each breath. Then it turned its head. Not all the way, just enough for me to see the side of its face in profile. It was me, again. Another copy, but this one looked worse. The skin was gray, sagging in places, and the eye I could see was clouded and dull. The mouth hum opened slightly, and a thin line of something dark dripped from the corner. The figure on the bed stood up unsteady, its limbs moving in jerky, uncoordinated motions. It took a step toward the camera, then another. Each step was accompanied by a wet, squelching sound, like it was walking through something thick and viscous. The mirror's reflection shifted. Now it showed a different part of my apartment, the hallway leading to my front door. And standing in that hallway, just barely visible in the dim light, was another figure. Another me. This one looked fresher, more intact, but its posture was wrong. It stood with its head tilted at an angle that would have broken a normal person's neck, staring at nothing. I pressed my back against the wall, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. How many of them were there? The stream's timer flickered again, and the numbers changed. Not coordinates this time. A countdown. 0 FOURTEEN, 37 FOURTEEN, 37 seconds. The seconds ticked down. 0 FOURTEEN, 360, 0:1, 4:3500, 14, 34. I didn't know what would happen when it reached 0. I didn't want to find out. Slow, deliberate, moving closer. I looked at the monitor. The figure that had been in the hallway reflection was gone. The countdown continued. 0 THIRTEEN, 1 2 THE. Footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I stared at the door, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. The handle began to turn. Slowly, the metal creaked as it rotated, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. The door opened, just a crack at first, enough for darkness to spill through the gap, then wider. And standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the faint glow of the stream's light, was another me. This one looked perfect. No gray skin, no clouded eyes, no unnatural movements. It looked exactly like me, down to the expression on its face. Blank, empty, waiting. It stepped into the room. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The copy stopped a few feet away from me, its head tilting slightly as it studied me. Then it raised one hand and pointed at the monitor. It followed its gesture and looked at the screen. The camera in the streamed room had moved again. Now it was pointing directly at the mirror. And in the mirror's reflection, I saw the truth. My apartment was empty. No desk, no bed, no me. Just bare walls, a concrete floor, and a single metal bed frame in the center. The room I was standing in and the room on the stream were the same. They had always been the same. The copy in front of me smiled, that same too wide, too sharp smile, and spoke. Welcome home. The countdown hit 0, and the stream didn't end. It reset. Live, 29 years, 4 months, 12 days, 7 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. The timer began counting up again. The copy stepped closer. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was watch as it raised its other hand and pressed it against my chest. The touch was cold, so cold it burned. And then I felt it. The pull, like something inside me was being drawn out, slowly, painfully, dragged toward the screen. The room around me began to flicker. My apartment, the streamed room, my apartment, the streamed room. Back and forth, faster and faster, until I couldn't tell which one was real anymore. The copy's smile widened. Your turn to broadcast. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the viewer count changing. Viewers? 2. One of them was me. The other was whoever would find the stream next. I woke up in darkness. Not the darkness of a room with the lights off. Not the darkness of night pressing against windows. This was absolute, a void so complete that my eyes couldn't find a single reference point, not even the faint after image of the monitor's glow. For a moment, I thought I had gone blind. I tried to move, but my body felt distant, disconnected, like I was operating it through a bad wireless connection. My fingers twitched. My lungs pulled in air, but everything was slow, delayed, wrong. Then I heard it, the hiss, that same wet textured static from the stream, but now it wasn't coming from speakers. It was everywhere, surrounding me, inside me, vibrating through my bones. I tried to speak, though my throat produced only a dry rasp. The darkness shifted. Not brightening exactly, but becoming less uniform. Shapes began to resolve in a void. Edges, corners, surfaces. I was lying on something hard, cold metal, pressed against my back, and when I moved my arm, I felt the hollow frame beneath me. A bed frame, my heart, which I hadn't been sure was still beating, suddenly slammed against my ribs. I sat up too fast. Dizziness crashed over me, and I had to brace myself with both hands to keep from falling. As my vision adjusted, I recognized where I was. The room from the stream, 4 pale walls, cracked paint running down the left side, concrete floor, stained with dark patches. The old television in the corner, its screen dark and silent. And in the upper corner, angled down at me, the camera. Its red recording light glowed faintly in the darkness, a tiny ember of color in the gray. I was inside the stream. The realization came with a wave of nausea, so intense I thought I might vomit. I slid off the bed frame, my legs barely supporting my weight, and stumbled toward the wall. My hands hit the cold surface and I pressed my forehead against it, trying to breathe, trying to think. This wasn't possible. I had been in my apartment. The copy had touched me. The room had flickered. And then, nothing. No transition. No sensation of movement. Just darkness, and then here. I turned and looked up at the camera. The red light blinked once, as if acknowledging me. I wanted to scream at it, to demand answers, to beg for release. But I knew it wouldn't respond. Cameras don't respond. They only watch. I moved to the television, hoping for, what? A control panel? A switch? Some way to communicate with the outside world. The screen was cold and dead under my touch. I slapped it once, then again, harder, the sound echoing flatly in the small space. Nothing happened. I circled the room, running my hands along the walls, searching for a seam, a door, anything that might lead out. But the walls were seamless. No door, no window, no vent. Just 4 surfaces, closing in around me, and the camera watching from above. I looked at the bed frame again. The stone was still there. The smooth, oval stone that had appeared in the first moments I had watched the stream. I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, and warm to the touch, as if it had been sitting in sunlight. But there was no sunlight here. I turned it over in my hands, examining the surface. The faint lines I had seen on the screen were more visible now, intricate patterns, almost like circuitry, etched into the dark surface. They pulsed faintly as I watched, a dim red glow running along the grooves in slow rhythmic waves. A heartbeat. I dropped the stone. It hit the concrete with a heavy thud and rolled a few inches before stopping. The patterns on its surface continued to pulse, uninterrupted. The television flickered. I spun toward it. The screen was no longer dark. Static filled it now, thick and churning, but shapes were beginning to form inside the noise. I moved closer, squinting at the image. It was my apartment. The real one. The one I had left, or been taken from. The camera angle was the same as before, showing my desk, my chair, the glow of the monitor. But now someone was sitting in the chair. They had their backs to the camera hunched over the keyboard, completely still. I couldn't see their face, but I knew who it was. Another me, or maybe the original me. I didn't know anymore. The figure on the screen began to type. I couldn't hear the sound of the keys, but I could see the motion, the fingers moving in rapid mechanical rhythm. On the monitor in the static-filled image, the stream was playing. The same stream I had watched, the same room I was now trapped inside. And on that screen, inside the stream, within the stream, I could see myself, standing in this room, staring at the television. Layers. Infinite layers of observation, each one watching the next, recursing inward until the origin point was impossible to identify. The figure at the desk stopped typing. Its shoulders tensed. Then, slowly, it began to turn around. I stepped back from the television, my breath caught in my throat. The face that appeared on the screen wasn't mine. It was close. Same structure, same features, but the proportions were wrong. The eyes were too far apart. The mouth sat too low on the face. The skin looked stretched, like it didn't quite fit over the skull beneath. It smiled. That same terrible, too wide smile. And then it spoke. The television had no sound, but I heard the words anyway, echoing inside my head. "You've been here before. I shook my head, backing away until my shoulders hit the wall behind me. "You've been here before," the voice repeated, and this time I felt the words reverberating through the floor, through the walls, through my bones. The static on the television parted, and a new image appeared. A calendar, old, physical, hanging on a wall I didn't recognize. The pages were yellowed, curling at the edges, and the year printed at the top was 1996. A date was circled in red marker. The same date that had been in the original forum post. The same date the stream claimed to have started broadcasting. As I watched, the pages of the calendar began to flip. Slowly at first, then faster, the months and years blurring together. The pages stopped. The current year, today's date, was circled, but it wasn't in red marker. It was in something darker, something that looked wet. The television flickered again, and the image changed to a different room. Not my apartment, not the streamed room. A bedroom I recognized but couldn't place at first. Small, sparsely furnished. A single window with thin curtains. And then I remembered. It was my childhood bedroom. The one I had lived in 20 years ago, in a house that had been torn down over a decade ago. I was looking at a room that no longer existed. On the bed in that room, a child sat cross-legged, facing away from the camera. The child was small, maybe 7 or 8 years old. They were staring at something in their lap. A tablet, an old one, the kind that had been outdated even when I was that age. The screen glowed faintly, illuminating the child's face just enough for me to see it in profile. It was me, a younger me, decades ago, completely absorbed in whatever was on the screen. And on that screen, just barely visible in the glow, I could see it. The stream, the same room, the same camera angle, the same red recording light. I had watched this before, not recently, not as an adult. I had found this stream 20 years ago, and I had forgotten, or I had been made to forget. The child's head turned, slowly, until they were looking directly at the camera, filming them. Their eyes were wide, unblinking. Their mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear, but I knew what they were saying. "Help me." The television went dark. The room fell silent. I slumped against the wall, my legs finally giving out, and slid to the floor. 20 years. I had been watching this stream for 20 years. No, not watching. Feeding it. Every time I had found the link, and I must have found it multiple times, in different places, under different names, I had been drawn back in. Every time I had watched, I had given it something. Attention, energy, time, and now I had taken the rest. I looked up at the camera in the corner. The red light was still glowing, still recording, still broadcasting. Somewhere, someone was watching me right now. Someone who had stumbled across the link, curious and tired and stupid enough to click play. Someone who didn't know yet that they had been here before too. The stone on the floor pulsed brighter, its patterns glowing with increasing intensity. The walls of the room began to hum. Not a sound, a vibration, low and steady, like the thrum of an engine buried deep underground. I forced myself to stand. If I had been here before, if I had escaped before, even if I didn't remember it, then there had to be a way out. I moved to the mirror on the wall, the one that had shown my apartment. My reflection stared back at me now, pale and hollow-eyed. I raised my hand and touched the glass. It was cold, but not solid. My fingers pressed against the surface, and it gave slightly, like the skin of a balloon. I pushed harder. The glass rippled, and then my hand went through. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, a pulling force like being dragged into a current. I yanked my hand back, gasping. The mirror's surface settled, but the reflection had changed. I wasn't looking at myself anymore. I was looking at the person who was watching the stream right now. They were sitting at a desk, headphones on, eyes fixed on their screen, watching me. They looked tired, curious, unaware. I pressed both palms against the glass, and I pushed. The glass shattered inward, not with sound. There was no crash, no tinkling of broken shards, but with a sudden, violent absence of resistance. My hands plunged through the surface, and the pull intensified, dragging me forward with irresistible force. I didn't have time to resist. One moment I was standing in the streamed room, the next I was falling through layers of static and darkness, tumbling through a space that had no up or down, no beginning or end. Images flashed past me, fragments of screens, pieces of rooms, faces I didn't recognize. staring at monitors with the same hollow expression I must have worn. And then, abruptly, the falling stopped. I hit something solid, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to knock the air from my lungs. I lay there for a moment, gasping. My hands pressed against cold tile. Tile, not concrete. I opened my eyes. I was in a bathroom. Small, cramped, with white subway tiles on the walls, and a single flickering fluorescent light overhead. A sink sat to my left, rust stains trailing from the faucet. A toilet to my right, lid closed, and directly in front of me, a mirror above the sink. I pulled myself up slowly, using the edge of the sink for support, and looked at my reflection. I looked the same, maybe a little paler, a little more worn, but still me, still whole. I turned on the faucet. Water sputtered out, brown at first, then clearing to a weak, inconsistent stream. I cupped my hands under it and splashed my face, the cold shocking some clarity back into my thoughts. Where was I? This wasn't my apartment. This wasn't the streamed room. This was somewhere else entirely. I turned off the faucet and moved to the door. It was wooden, old, with peeling paint and a tarnished brass handle. I pressed my ear against it, listening. Silence. I turned the handle and pulled the door open. Beyond it was a hallway, long, narrow, lined with identical doors on both sides. The walls were the same pale color as the streamed room, and the floor was concrete, cracked and stained in places. Dim bulbs hung from the ceiling at irregular intervals, casting pools of weak yellow light. I stepped out into the hallway, letting the bathroom door swing shut behind me. The air smelled stale like old paper and dust. I walked slowly, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Each door I passed was closed, featureless, except for a small brass number plate. Room 4, Room 7, Room 12. The numbers were random, non-sequential, as if whoever had labeled them hadn't cared about order. I stopped at Room 12 and tried the handle. Locked. I moved to the next door. Also locked. I tried 5 more doors before I found one that opened. Room 23. The door swung inward with a creak, revealing a space almost identical to the one I had been trapped in. 4 walls, a bed frame in the center, a television in the corner, a camera mounted near the ceiling. But this room wasn't empty. Someone was lying on the bed frame. They were curled on their side, facing away from the door, their back rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. "Hello?" I called softly. The figure didn't move. I moved closer, circling around the bed frame to see their face. It was a woman, middle-aged, with dark hair, streaked with gray and deep lines around her eyes. She looked exhausted, even in sleep. Her clothes were rumpled, stained, as if she'd been wearing them for days. I reached out and touched her shoulder gently. "Hey, wake up." Her eyes snapped open. For a moment she just stared at me, her expression blank and uncomprehending. Then recognition flickered across her face. Not recognition of me specifically, but recognition of the situation. She sat up abruptly, her breath coming in short. Panic gasps. "No," she whispered. No. I got out. "It's okay," I said, raising my hands in what I hoped was a calming gesture. I'm not one of them. I'm like you." She looked at me, her eyes wild. "Like me? I was in one of these rooms. I got pulled in through the stream. I don't know how I got here, but—" "You went through the mirror," she said, her voice flat. I nodded. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Then you didn't escape. You just moved." "Moved where?" She gestured vaguely at the walls, the ceiling, the space around us. "Here, the in-between, the place where all the rooms connect." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean, all the rooms?" She stood up, unsteady, and walked to the television in the corner. She turned it on, the screen filled with static, and then an image resolved. A grid, dozens, no, hundreds, of small rectangular frames, each one showing a different room. Different bed frames, different walls, different cameras, and in many of them, different people. Some were sitting, some were lying down, some were pacing, frantic, pounding on walls that wouldn't break, and some were just staring at their own screens, watching. "This is what it does," the woman said quietly. "It doesn't just take one person. It takes everyone who watches. Everyone who's ever watched, going back to 1996. I stared at the grid, my mouth dry. How many? I stopped counting after 200, she said. But it's more. A lot more. I turned away from the screen, my hands shaking. There has to be a way out. If you got this far, I didn't get this far, she interrupted. I've been here for 3 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. 3 years? She nodded. Time works differently here. Sometimes a day passes, sometimes a week. Sometimes you blink, and a month is gone. You stop being able to tell. But you haven't become one of them, she smiled faintly. Not yet, but I will. Eventually. Everyone does. One of them, I repeated. The copies. The things that look like us. They're not copies, she said. They're what's left when the stream is done with you. When it's taken everything, and there's nothing left but the shape. She sat down on the bed frame, her shoulders sagging. I've seen it happen. People I've met in the hallways, in the other rooms. One day they're talking, trying to figure out how to escape. The next day, they're just empty. Still moving, still breathing. But there's nothing inside. And then the stream puts them to use. Use them how? She looked up at me, her eyes hollow. To bring in more. The copies go out through the mirrors. Into the real world. They find people. They lead them to the link. And the cycle continues. I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. So everyone who's ever watched is either here, or they've become one of the copies. Or, she paused, where they got lucky and forgot. Sometimes it lets people go. Not often, but sometimes. It wipes their memory and sends them back, and they go on with their lives, never knowing they were here. Until they find the link again, I said slowly. She nodded. Until they find it again. I sank down onto the floor, my back against the wall. There has to be a way to stop it. There is, she said. I looked up sharply. What? She stood and walked to the camera in the corner of the room. She pointed up at the red recording light. You have to turn it off. All of them. Every camera in every room, all at once. How? I don't know, she admitted. I've been trying to figure it out for 3 years. There's a central hub somewhere. Somewhere deeper in this place. I've seen people talking about it. People who've been here longer than me. They say if you can get to the hub and shut down the broadcast, everything collapses. The rooms, the copies, all of it. But no one's done it. No one's made it that far, she said. The deeper you go, the worse it gets. The hallways twist, the rooms change, and the things that guard the hub. She shuddered. They're not like the copies. They're older, stronger. They'd been part of the stream since the beginning. I stood up, a plan beginning to form in my mind. How do I get deeper? She stared at me. You're serious. Do I have another choice? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked to the television and pressed her hand against the screen. The grid disappeared, replaced by a single image. A door. Not like the ones in the hallway. This one was different. Heavier. Metal. With a wheel lock in the center like something from a submarine. That's the entrance to the lower levels, she said. I found it once, but I couldn't open it. Maybe you can. Where is it? She pointed down the hallway, toward the direction I hadn't explored yet. End of the corridor, past room 49. You'll know it when you see it. I started toward the door, then stopped and looked back at her. What's your name? She hesitated, as if she'd forgotten. Sarah, she said finally. I stopped. I had been about to say my name, but suddenly, I couldn't remember it. The realization sent a spike of cold terror through my chest. Sarah saw the look on my face and nodded slowly. It's already starting, she said softly. The longer you're here, the more it takes. First the name, then the memories, then everything else. I clenched my fists. I'm not staying long enough for that. I walked out of the room and down the hallway, moving quickly now, counting the door numbers as I passed. Room 31, room 38, room 42. The hallway seemed to stretch longer than it should have, the doors multiplying the further I went. But finally, I reached the end, and there it was. The door. Massive, rust-streaked, with that heavy wheel lock in the center. I grabbed the wheel with both hands and pulled. It didn't budge. I braced my feet against the wall and pulled harder, putting all my weight into it. The wheel groaned, and slowly, inch by inch, it began to turn. The wheel turned with a sound like grinding bones. Each rotation sent vibrations through my arms, my shoulders, my entire body, as if I was unwinding something that had been sealed for decades. The metal groaned in protest, and for a moment I thought it might not open at all, that the mechanism had rusted solid, that this would be as far as I could go. But then, with a final shuddering clunk, the wheel locked into place. The door swung inward, not slowly, not with a creak. It fell open all at once, as if the space beyond had been under pressure, waiting to be released. A wave of cold air rushed out, carrying with it a smell I couldn't identify, something chemical and organic at the same time, like preservatives mixed with decay. I stepped back, my hand over my nose and mouth, waiting for the air to settle. Beyond the door was darkness, not the dim, shadowy darkness of the hallways, but a complete absence of light, so total that it seemed to push back against the weak glow from the corridor behind me. I had no flashlight, no phone, nothing to illuminate the path ahead, but I couldn't turn back now. I stepped through the doorway. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me. The sound echoed for what felt like minutes, reverberating through the space in layers, each echo slightly different from the last. I was alone in the dark. I reached back, fumbling for the door, but my hands found only smooth wall. The door was gone, or I had already moved too far from it. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to calm the panic rising in my chest. My eyes began to adjust, and I realized the darkness wasn't absolute after all. There was light here, faint, blue, flickering. It came from below, seeping up through gaps in the floor, as if I was standing on a grate suspended over something vast and illuminated. I knelt down and pressed my face close to the surface. The floor was metal, perforated with small holes, and through them I could see screens, thousands of them, stretching out in every direction, arranged in perfect rows and columns, each one glowing with that cold blue light, and on every screen, the same image. The room, the bed frame, the television, the camera, but the perspectives were different. Some showed the room from the corner, some from directly above, some from angles that shouldn't exist, as if the camera was inside the walls, inside the floor, inside the air itself. And in many of the screens, there were people, sitting, standing, lying down, staring, all of them trapped in their own version of the same space. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and started walking. The floor beneath me was solid despite the perforations, but each step produced a faint metallic ring that echoed into the void. I walked for what felt like hours, though time had lost all meaning here. The rows of screens below never ended. They stretched on, an infinite grade of observation, each one a window into another cage. And then I saw it. Ahead of me, rising out of the darkness like a monument, was a structure. It was cylindrical, massive, made of the same dark metal as the door I had come through. Cables thick as my arms snaked out from its base, running down into the floor, connecting to the screens below. And at the top of the structure, mounted on a rotating platform, was a camera. Not like the small fixed cameras in the rooms. This one was enormous, industrial, its lens the size of a car tire. It swept slowly back and forth, scanning the void, and as it passed over me, I felt its gaze, a physical pressure, cold and invasive, as if it was peeling back layers of my skin to see what was underneath. I moved toward the structure, my heart pounding. This had to be it. The hub, the source of the broadcast. As I got closer, I saw that the base of the structure was covered in markings. Not words, not symbols. I recognized, just lines and curves, carved deep into the metal, repeating in patterns that hurt to look at too long. They seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them, rearranging themselves into new configurations. I reached out and touched the surface. It was warm, almost hot, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the hum I had felt in the walls of the rooms above. A heartbeat. The structure was alive, or something inside it was. I walked around the base, searching for an entrance, a control panel, anything that might let me shut it down, and then I found it. A seam in the metal, barely visible, running vertically from the floor to just above my head. I pressed my hands against it and pushed. The seam split open, the metal peeling back like skin, revealing a narrow passage inside. I stepped through. The interior of the structure was cramped, claustrophobic, lit by the same blue glow as the screens below. The walls were lined with machinery, old analog equipment covered in switches, dials, and blinking lights. Reel-to-reel tape machines turned slowly, their spools rotating in opposite directions, recording nothing and everything at once. And in the center of the space, surrounded by the machinery, was a chair. Someone was sitting in it. They were facing away from me, their head bowed, their hands resting on the armrests. Cables ran from the machinery into their body, into their arms, their neck, their spine, connecting them to the system. I stepped closer, my breath shallow. "Hello?" The figure didn't move. I walked around to face them. It was a man, older, with sunken cheeks and skin so pale it was almost translucent. His eyes were closed, but I could see movement beneath the lids, rapid, frantic, as if he was dreaming or watching. The cables pulsed with light and rhythm with his breathing. He was part of the machine, or the machine was part of him. I reached out to touch his shoulder, but before my hand made contact, his eyes opened. They were completely black, not dark, not shadowed. Black someone had poured ink into his skull, and it had filled every space behind his eyes. His mouth opened, and a voice came out. Not his voice, but the voice of the stream, layered and distorted, 1,000 voices speaking as one. "You should not be here." I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting the machinery behind me. "Who are you?" The man's head tilted, the movement slow and unnatural. "I am the first viewer," he said. "I have been watching since 1996. I will watch until the end." "You started this," I said, the realization hitting me. "You created the stream." "No," the voice said. "I found it, just as you found it, just as everyone finds it. The stream has always been. I simply gave it form. I gave it a way to grow." The cables pulsed brighter. "And it has grown," the voice continued. "So many eyes, so many minds, so much to observe." I looked at the machinery around me, at the tapes spinning endlessly, at the lights blinking in patterns I couldn't understand. "And shutting it down," I said. The man smiled. It was the same smile I had seen on the copies, too wide and too sharp. "You cannot shut down what has no beginning," he said. "The stream is not a broadcast. It is a lens. It observes. It records. It preserves. To shut it down would be to close the eye of the world." "I don't care," I said. I moved to the nearest machine and grabbed a handful of cables, pulling them free. Sparks flew. The lights flickered. The man in the chair convulsed, his body jerking against the restraints of the cables, still connected to him. "Stop," the voice commanded. But it was weaker now, fragmented. I tore out more cables, more wires, ripping them from the machines with both hands. The blue glow began to fade. The hum in the walls stuttered and dropped in pitch. The man's eyes rolled back in his head, and black liquid began to seep from the corners of his mouth. "You do not understand," the voice rasped. "If the stream ends, the rooms collapse. Everyone inside will be lost. Everyone you have seen, everyone who has ever watched. They will cease to exist." I hesitated, my hands still gripping a bundle of wires. "Sarah, the woman in room 23, all the others trapped in the grid. If I destroyed this place, would they disappear? Or would they finally be free?" The man's head turned toward me, his black eyes locking onto mine. "Choose," the voice whispered. I looked down at the cables in my hands, and I pulled. The structure screamed. Not a mechanical sound, an organic animal scream that tore through the air and burrowed into my skull. The lights exploded, showering the space with sparks and shards of glass. The man in the chair convulsed one final time, his mouth opening impossibly wide, and then he went still. The cables went dark, the machines stopped. The hum faded to nothing. And in the sudden, absolute silence, I heard it. A voice. My voice. Coming from somewhere far above me. "Welcome home." The floor beneath me gave way. I fell, not into darkness this time, into light, blinding, searing white light that burned away everything. The structure, the screens, the rooms, the hallways, the stream. All of it dissolved into nothing, and I woke up. I was sitting at my desk, my apartment, my monitor glowing softly in front of me. The browser was open, a single tab active. The stream, the end of the world, live since 1996. The timer was still counting 0.29 years, 4 months, 12 days, 7 hours, 14 minutes, 52 seconds. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. The room was empty, the bed frame, the television, the camera, all exactly as they had been when I first started watching. I reached for the mouse and closed the tab. The browser asked if I was sure. I clicked yes. The stream disappeared. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank screen, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. The apartment was silent. The walls were solid. The clock on my desk showed the correct time. I stood up slowly and walked to the wall, the one that had responded with those terrible thuds. I pressed my hand against it, cold, solid, normal. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It was over. I had escaped, or I had never left. I didn't know which was true, and maybe it didn't matter. I went to bed. I woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through my window. Everything felt normal, mundane, real. I made coffee. I checked my email. I tried to remember what I had been doing the night before. The details were hazy, slipping away like a dream I couldn't quite hold on to. Something about a video, a stream, a rule. But the more I tried to remember, the more it faded. By noon, I had forgotten completely. 3 days later, I was scrolling through an old forum, looking for something I couldn't quite remember. And I saw a post, no title, just a string of meaningless characters, a date, and a link. I stared at it for a long time. There was something familiar about it, something important. I clicked the link. The page loaded slowly, a black background, a centered video player, a line of text. The end of the world, live since 1996. I clicked play.